Welcome back, peeps. My name is Chad Wilson from Simple Cloudware, and today we are going to continue our series by adding accounts to our C# core function. Keep your head in the cloud. Alright, let's get started. So of course, the first thing we want to do is add our models, because of course they will be used first when we start creating our code. So this one's kind of a lengthy type-in exercise, so you can skip forward if you're just following along. But I'm going to type it all in regardless. That way you can see, the creation process. And of course, I try to be very careful when I'm typing in these variables because it is the source of many of my errors when I'm creating software. So we're just going to go through step by step. I think we have 10 or 15 of these. And you can just skip forward in the video if you don't want to watch the actual creation. One of the things when I'm creating accounts, I make sure to have a customer ID and an external ID, because you're going to need a couple extra slots. For instance, when you're connecting to a payment system, that's going to be an ID you need to track, and then also there are ID connections to other APIs and these sorts of things. So having an external ID is super useful. And then the client ID in this particular case is connected to the Simple Cloudware framework, where clients can have multiple accounts. So all of these IDs have a use. And then the username and the profile name are the profile image or for display. So if you have their particular account or are using it in many different ways, then you can have a profile image, and if they want to name themselves a particular way, you have a slot for that. And then here, of course, is the classic address. Just get all of this in. And another important part of having these sort of records is when were they created. And we can't forget the postal. And the last couple items are for the storage of the secret and making the account inactive and active, password reset, the password reset timing. And these are all very practical needs when it comes to creating an account. And the reset date is all about that kind of forgot password cycle, where we don't want to have that just opened up forever. So we can give them, half an hour or whatnot to be able to log into their email address and actually click the link that brings them back into the reset the password. It's a security precaution. Okay, so it looks good. We have a complete account with some admin usage. So from here, let's now create a post. So right now we have, remember, our get HTTP call. And the post is similar, but we're going to actually create another function for that, just so we can have a little bit of a separation. And then we'll demonstrate how to break out some of the common elements into their own functions, so we don't have duplicate code. So for our post, of course, it's going to come in with a body. And let's take out this URI creation, because it is going to be similar across all of our calls. And let's put that to where both of these particular functions can call it. So we're just going to have code reuse here. And this will be kind of our parameter creator. And then we're just going to cut and paste that original set. And let's see. What is this giving us heartburn? We're going to be just passing in the endpoint, and we're also going to need to pass in the parameters themselves. Let's just put that up front. And remember, this was a list of key value pairs. And they were both strings. And then we'll just call this parameters. Okay. Seems like we still have a couple errors here. Oh yeah, I think I see what our issue is. Let's get that return in there. So it'll give us some heartburn. Let's see. Okay, I see what's happening. I've set this outside of the class. So hard to see on the smaller screen. There we go. I just had one level out of the class. So now we've broken out this chunk of code, and this is what I usually do is I wait for second use to break things out into their own functions. That saves me from not sure what we call it. It'd be sometimes when I'm coding, I think that there's going to be many things that will use a particular call, but they don't, and then all my code becomes too abstract, and then I'm going layer after layer after layer, where if I use the idea of the second use, then I can keep my code as close to the original flow as possible without having so many layers. Alright, and this is where our body's going to go. And we're going to just be passing this as a string. You can pass all kinds of different types as contents, but this is just JSON, so it'll auto map it on the other side. Okay, looks good. And of course, we're making a post here. So once we get these two calls down, then we can really rock and roll, because most of the particular calls out to another API are going to be get and post. And then we'll do the same pattern once we hit our first put and delete. Okay, so now let's just copy this first API test, and let's start building our add account. So we've got some fundamentals in here. Make sure that our call is to our post, and then we're passing in the new endpoint. And then the first thing that we're going to hit on this is bringing in the parameters. And of course, let's set our model here that we're going to deserialize the result. And just start working the code. So we know here we're going to pass in parameters and the body. Perfect. So now let's start gathering up this information to pass in. And the first thing we want to do, now that we're going to actually check to see if we have appropriate variables being passed to our functions, is let's create a method base. And what this will give us the ability to do is grab the particular function name, and you go, okay, well, how is that useful? Well, later on we're going to create the ability to log errors, and it's super useful to know exactly which function had the error. So we're just going to break out here because this is going to be used in every particular function, and we're just going to create a string that helps us parse out this method name. Because when it comes to us, it has some carets and some other stuff we don't want in it. This is a pretty common pattern for getting the string to just look, or the information out of the string, just what you want. So we're going to get this method, and the declaring type, name, and we're going to split it because it comes in with all of these carets and extra information that we don't want. So we're just going to split it on the escape caret, and we're going to do that to a list. If I can get my spelling right. Okay, to list. And sometimes on the to list it won't show or come in, and it's because the particular framework isn't here. So we can just click Control period and actually bring in that framework, and then we look good. All right. So now that we have this kind of broken apart by splitting it, what we need to do is just capture the actual name. Which is going to be the first piece. And then it also has the begin caret that we're going to knock out of it. And we're just going to replace this with an empty string. So that gives us a nice and neat method name. And then we're just going to set it to lower. And then return it. And I like to do the processing and then return the result, just so when I'm tracing things, I can put the trace before it actually returns it. It's just a little trick. Okay, and then we're just going to make this call. Get the current method, and then we're going to pass this bad boy into our new method capture name. Great. This will give us the ability to identify where we are for logging. And the next thing that's super important when it comes to logging is providing a tracking ID so that your consumers can have an ability to take this tracking ID and then either give it to you, or if you're a developer, then go and use this tracking ID to find the log in whatever logging system. So then you have the method name, the error, and the actual log ID or a tracking ID. So now that we have that set up, let's start grabbing our parameters that we're passing in. So for each one of these parameters, I'm going to grab it and then check to see if it actually was present. So that's not too hard to do. We can assign these particular queries to a variable and then check using string is null or empty. And if it is null or empty, then we can return a bad request. And in this bad request, what we want to do is we want to give just enough information for either the user or the developer to troubleshoot the issue without getting the full error dumped out on them, which can be a security issue. So when we get to the video in which we're creating logging, then we'll dump the entire error into the log and then just show the method name and a little comment and a tracking ID to the particular caller of this function, and then date. Great, so now we're just going to use this pattern to be able to capture the particular parameters that we pass to this function. And in this one, we're actually going to be reading the stream because it's a body, so how we capture is a little bit different. So it's a stream reader. For that particular body. And then we're just going to read it to the end. Good. And then we can do the same check here. And as we build up these little patterns in our code, then we're able to code, at a higher velocity because we already have these sort of things sorted out. So the next thing we're going to do is, it's good to know that we actually got the request body, but let's try to map it to the actual model to make sure that the information that we have coming in is valid, and then pass back a bad request if it isn't. So how we do that is we just, in a try catch, attempt to serialize this data into that model, and it'll either work or it won't. And if it doesn't work, then we can catch the fact that there have some sort of a structure or grammatical error, and then pass that back to them. So first we're seeing that, do we have data? And now we're seeing, is this data structured in an appropriate way that we can use? And we're just going to grab the general exception. And this is where you'll see where we're not going to pass the exception in its entirety back up to the customer, but we're just going to pass them information that they can either go to logging or troubleshoot themselves, and then we will at a later video take this exception message and then log it. Alright, so that looks good. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is add our parameters. So let's go and grab this little chunk of code right here. And let's add our token in. And instead of it being the response access token, we're actually getting this from our string that we've verified. And then we can just pass that in. Great. And I think the response model will be good. I think we're good. Make sure that the function name is named appropriately. I try to keep all of these names of endpoints and calls the same if possible. And let's set a breakpoint. Let's fire this bad boy up. Alright, this is just bringing up our emulator that we can run storage, and we can also run functions. All kinds of things are used in this emulator. And now let's go over to our Postman and let's create a new request. And we'll call this add account. And this is where you really need to hop over to Postman, because with the gets you could do in a browser, but when you need to construct a post, then it's time to come over to Postman. We should probably continue on in Postman from here on out, because we can save our calls as we make them, and then we can use them to recreate the next set of calls and be more efficient. So we're creating our post, and then we grab this from the command prompt. And so now let's construct our account. And so we're going to select raw, and then we're going to do JSON. And let's then create the JSON. So we have to be very careful here, because spelling will kill you every time, and it's killed me. And so what I usually do is I will go and grab the exact model just for spelling error issues. So let's just grab these. And setting up these models is always painful, especially if they can get really big. Alright, so let's just delete out everything we don't need. And even though it's monotonous, let's take special care just because it'll save our butts in the future. And then I'm always constantly reviewing the particular strings to make sure that what I typed in initially doesn't have any spelling errors and these sort of things. Alright, let's get rid of all this. And sometimes when it's a lot of variables, I'll bring this into another app and then do replace and just replace all of this stuff with nothing and just knock it all out to make it faster. But this isn't that big. Alright, so we have a clean set of variable names. These are all going to just map in standard JSON pattern. Oh, let's just cut and paste this in. And the same on this side. And there's one issue of actually typing things in, and that creates possible issues. And then there's the cut and paste that also creates issues. So you just want to be very, very careful. And if you get distracted, which can happen, then when you restart again, take a second to kind of see where you're at before you start, because you might start a little bit beyond or whatnot, and then you create a problem for yourself. And then for all of these accounts, we are not going to put anything in for them because they're generated, or they can be used at a future state or a future time. So let's just add the fundamentals. Well, look at this. Has this been spelled wrong? Because the E is missing. Let's go and make sure that the E isn't missing in Visual Studios. Nope, it's good here. Must be a cut and paste issue. Let's go back and look at it. Oh yeah, here it is. Our lost E. So I'll just put some test data in here. I usually, with these test files, in the first string field, I'll label them test instead of using actual names, so that when we're reporting later on or the like, there's an obvious notation that this was just for testing purposes. There's the kind of the classic, phone number that's, not valid. It just helps sort out confusion. And then I'll just put in just cheeseball password. When we're creating the UI, we can use the other functions and validations to check, to make sure this is all good information. Since we're just attempting it first, then we can just try to hit the minimum. See if we can make a submission. Let me save that. Let's fire this thing up and see if we can make the call. Now usually the first call, there'll be some amount of tweaking necessary to make the whole thing go. But I think we're looking pretty good, so let's see what happens. You know, and now that I think about it, we're not going to be able to make this call until we have a token. So let's actually start building out our library in here of all of these calls that we've been just using from the browser before. And let's get all this set in here as we build out this entire project. And then remember, we pass in the secret to get our token. And if you'd like to get a secret to follow along, the link is in the description below. You can just click on that and we can provide you a secret so you can actually run these projects. Then what we're going to do is just copy out the secret from our Alright. Let's send this bad boy and see what happens. Okay, so we're getting our token. Just run through this. We've tested this before. And now we're demonstrating the code that we abstracted away so it can be used for common use. Good, we were able to get a first call. So now we have a token. So now we can cut and paste this token into all of our other calls and then use it until it expires. So we're starting to kind of build up our library here. And this is actually a parameter. So now we have a token and we have a body created in Postman. Cool. So let's save this and send it and see what we've got. And like I said, don't be discouraged if on the first call it doesn't work. It usually takes a few times to actually get it. So you can see here where we're splitting apart this and kind of knocking the garbage out to give us a nice clean name. So now we're checking for our token, looks good. Streamed our body in, good. Now let's try to map this guy. Alright, so there's an issue. So let's take a look at what we've got here. And it doesn't like the fact that we're not passing in a reset time on the password. So you know what we're going to do is this more admin stuff. Let's just knock it out. Let's just take this stuff out for now, because this would be something that was set as part of a reset password procedure, so we don't need it now. And then the secret is going to be created on the server, so we can keep that or we can take it out. Might as well just take it out. Okay, let's try it again. Alright, here we go. Nice. So now we know we have a map, you know, a valid model because we were able to deserialize it into our C# model class, account model. So now we add our token parameter, and then let's attempt the submit. Oh, we don't have a body. So we must have forgotten to map our data model that we just attempted to the body string. So let's go back and do that. And what we're going to do is we're just going to serialize it back into the body string. And then this whole routine here is just to check for valid data and a valid data structure up front. Deserializing and serializing is just a quick way of doing that. You could also check the schema. Alright, let's try it again. Alright, so we were able to deserialize and serialize it. Now we actually have a body to pass to the API. Nice. And we successfully created an account. That's really cool. And you see we have our email has been encrypted, so we know that when it's stored on the server, that even if there is a breach, they're not going to be able to get any contact information. And there we go. So from here, now that we have the ability to create an account, let's then move to getting the account list so we can actually see the account we created, and then let's try to update the active and inactive, which is kind of the pattern that we have been doing in our other projects. And those other projects are going to be listed below in the description, so if you'd like to follow from the beginning, you have that ability. Alright, so let's follow our same pattern of grabbing our working function, and then we're going to make a copy of it, and then let's knock out everything that we don't need and start adding in those things that we do. So we're going to get the accounts by client, and once again I like to mirror the names all the way through. I'm going to paste that into our call, get the body out of here, and we're going to turn this into a get call. Okay. And let's remove the extra body, because we don't need that. We're not posting anything anymore. So of course we do need to get the token, so that's going to stay. And you see how much of the particular code elements are similar per call, which makes it very fast to develop. So now let's create a new request. And that's good, and we're kind of continuing our mirroring of the endpoint call all the way through. And let's set an endpoint or a breakpoint, and now let's call it and actually get our URL from the tools. Okay, great. Copy that. We can start by having that, and then let's add our token. And our token should be valid from our last call, so let's just go over to our add account and grab the token from there. And a trick for Postman is if you want to grab these values, triple click on them. If you try to select and pull, the interface doesn't work quite right. So just triple click to get anything in those particular parameters. All right, so we're going through the same code, got the token. Now we're making our first attempt at this get call. It's calling out to the API. Look at that, we got our okay, so we're doing good. And then we died on the model. It was an account model. You know what the problem is we just had one account when we did the update, but this is going to be a list of all the accounts. So we just need to convert this to a list. Okay. Perfect. And then you start to kind of see the flow of, we get everything in, careful as possible, try the call, troubleshoot it, make sure we've got enough code surrounding that we can actually identify what's going on. And then we just work the bugs out of the software until we got a successful call. Okay, so we're back where we were, and we passed it. We've got 49 test accounts. Cool. So the next thing we want to do is let's continue using this pattern of using the prior function to then create the next one, and let's make accounts active and inactive. And that will bring us up to parity with the other software examples. Okay. And then we rename this function, we rename the get call to the endpoint in the simple Cloudware API. We have a token, and then we're going to also pass in the account ID. And then we give them the ability to understand what's happening, and they get an error. And then we have to remember to pass this in as part of our key value pair list, so it will appropriately attach this as a parameter to the URL. And then we got to set the active flag. And we just go through the same procedure. Getting it, seeing if it's null, setting required, and then adding it to the list of parameters. Okay. Looks good. Could it be that easy? I have a good feeling about this one. Got to make sure we get our model right this time. That's the cool part of using this call pattern, is if you do the transformation of the content response into the particular function, then you can use all that code over and over again. Alright, let's take a shot. See if we can get this one to go the first time. I'm following the same naming convention, pasting this in from the tool, copying our token, and then save and send. And let's not forget to put a breakpoint here so we can trace our way through. Alright, in the same pattern, let's collect up all three of our... Oh yeah, we forgot to add our parameters in our call, just when I thought this was going to be the one that worked the first time. It's all good. See, we got a nice and neat, without displaying too much information, response, error response. So let's go and grab one of these accounts. I'm not sure I want to do the first one. Let's grab one that's down here a little bit. Put that in, and then let's set the isActive flag to false. Okay. Let's try it again. Alright, so we made it through, adding all of our parameters in. Looks good. And make our get call. And okay, so we just set that poor soul to inactive. And now we should be able to use the get to verify that that actually happened. So let's do that. So you're starting to see how we're having the ability to create something, change something, and then actually verify the change happened. Alright, where are you? There it is, V65. Perfect. False. So there we go. We've made a successful update and the round trip in a function. Click the like button so other people just like you can find this video, and join our community by hitting that subscribe and that notification icon. If you have any questions or ideas, or you'd like to see a video created, please comment below, and remember, keep your head in the clouds.